This is the U.S. Department of Defense, and senior defense official holds a background briefing on a high altitude surveillance balloon. What does this balloon look like? Let's take a look at this. This is the clearest photo of the Chinese spy balloon so far. So that's what this Chinese spy balloon looks like. It's a very large balloon. It's very high in the atmosphere, and it clearly has these solar panels, and it has a payload which may consist of a surveillance equipment, maybe cameras, maybe some other equipment which is not visible from here. And yes, it is something that is capable of surveilling the landscape that it passes over. It's got a very high vantage point. So this spy balloon has intruded into US airspace. It is currently passing over the United States. The Chinese have accepted the fact that it's a Chinese balloon. They are claiming that this is a weather balloon or something like that, a meteorological balloon. It's not a spy balloon. It's just a meteorological balloon that has kind of strayed away from its originally planned course, and it's by mistake encroached into US territory. So they are saying that we are ascertaining the situation, and we are trying to verify what happened and why this balloon has intruded into US airspace. Uh, so this is what's called a stratospheric balloon. The stratosphere is one of the layers of the atmosphere of our planet. It begins roughly 10 kilometers above the surface, and it extends all the way to 50 kilometers roughly above the surface of the Earth. It's called the stratosphere because the air over there is stratified into various strata. And this balloon, I think it's about, they are giving the figures in feet. So I'm not sure how many feet, 60,000 feet or so, maybe 50, 60,000 feet above the surface of the planet. So that's what it is. This is an older image, and this tweet is from 2020. I'm not sure what it says. It says, what's this? Okay, I think it's over Japan. So these balloons that the Chinese manufacture, you can see this is a much, much clearer image. You can see it's got these solar panels and various other protruding antennas and equipment and all that. So this was a Chinese balloon over Japan. This also, they would say, was a mistake, apparently. Yeah. And so so people have been tweeting memes about this. Send American missiles to defend Ukrainian airspace. Great. Defend American airspace. No. So yeah, it's a set of these memes. So now, what is all this about? How do these stratospheric balloons work? Here's a visual guide. Yeah, the Chinese balloon is floating 60,000 feet over the US. And it's been described by the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, as a surveillance asset. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry says it's a weather balloon. But these balloons have intruded over various nations' airspace in the past 2-3 years. So there are no coincidences in geopolitics and in world affairs. If it happens once, we can understand, but if it happens multiple times, it's not a coincidence, and there's something fishy going on there. So this is a helium balloon. There are two gases that are extremely light. One is hydrogen, one is helium. Hydrogen is highly flammable. If you remember, in case there was this airship, a Zeppelin called the Hindenburg. It was a Nazi Germany made Zeppelin airship, and it caught fire over the US when it was landing in the 1930s or something. In the 1930s, I think 38, 39. Look it up in case you're interested. So that airship, that massive balloon, contained hydrogen. Hydrogen is highly flammable. It's very dangerous. Helium, on the other hand, is not flammable. So these days we use helium, and that's what it's like. It's got an inflation valve, a deflation valve. It has solar panels, and it has a payload which might include radar, cameras, and communication equipment, which would allow the balloon to transmit data in real time to satellites, and from the satellite to the control station in China. So it's most likely a spy balloon. Let's take a look at the journey. So it originated in China. The airship came from China. The country's foreign ministry confirmed. It's a weather balloon, they say, and it drifted, of course. Then it passed over the Aleutian Islands, which will, these are American islands. So that itself is fishy. And these islands, you have various defense establishments over there, defense stations, naval stations, radar stations. So it flew over the Aleutian Islands, which is fishy. And then it entered the US airspace. It flew over Canada first, then it entered US airspace over Montana, and it flew over this facility in Montana, where you have these silos that contain ballistic missiles. So once again, it's passing over something, an establishment that's related to defense, US defense, and now it's floating over Missouri and so on. So how do these balloons navigate? So typically, if you release a balloon into the atmosphere, it's going to drift around as per the wind. The wind will take it wherever it wants, or wherever the wind wants to take it. But in the case of a stratospheric balloon, at different layers of the stratosphere, the wind goes in different directions. And if the balloon has sensors that can sense at what altitude the wind is going in which direction, then it can rise or fall, increase its altitude or lower its altitude in order to follow a predetermined path. So this can be done through an autonomous computer on the balloon using AI, artificial intelligence, and through data it receives from satellites. And that's how you can actually navigate the balloon, just by making it go up or go down. This is something that even hot air balloonists do. In case you are interested in that. So hot air balloons, when someone's flying a hot air balloon, they take a look at the wind thermals, they take a look at the birds like eagles and vultures that are flying high in the air, and from that they can tell in what direction the wind is blowing at a certain altitude, and using that they can either go up or go down or come down and follow a certain trajectory that they would like to follow. So that's what this balloon apparently is also doing. So after this thing happened, Mr. Anthony Blinken, who was about to leave for China in the first ever visit of a high-ranking US official to China in many years, he abruptly cancelled the meeting. He said that the conditions are not right for this meeting to happen, for this trip to happen. Now people are saying, I think Donald Trump has called for shooting down this balloon. So it's not that easy. In the late 1990s, such a balloon went adrift in Canada. The Canadians sent their Air Force F-18 aircraft, and these aircraft fired more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition at that balloon. It definitely punctured the balloon, and what all it did was it made the balloon leak helium very slowly, and it took another 6 days for the balloon to come down. Yeah. So if it was hydrogen, it would burn immediately. You could also maybe fire a missile, but we don't quite know how a missile striking a balloon, what effect it would have. And the interesting thing is that because this balloon is not made of metal, it doesn't quite show up on defense radar, and it's flying so high that defense radar typically doesn't pick it up. So it's a very interesting low tech technology that the Chinese have used to spy on the US. So yeah, it's not that easy. I mean, and the other thing is that if you shoot this down, then all that metal, I mean, all that it may not be metal. There may be some metal in it. All that solar panels and other equipment will come down. It may hit civilians, and it's so high that it could spread over a very large area. And we don't quite know what else could be on that, and it's best not to do it. So that's why the Americans have chosen not to shoot this down. And so it's clear that this balloon is going to keep on drifting around the US, across the US, and eventually it will exit US airspace from the eastern seaboard, from the east coast of the US. So yeah, it's saying meteorological research and so on. And like it says, in 1998, the Canadian Air Force did all that. It did not really work. They fired 1,020 millimeter cannon rounds into the balloon. It still took 6 days before it finally came down. Now there's another balloon right now. So we have a balloon that's drifting over the US, and there is another balloon that is currently in the skies over Latin America. That's another Chinese balloon in the skies over Latin America. It's the size of 3 buses, and it's carrying a large payload, very similar to the one over the US. Strange object seen above Costa Rica as China investigates spy balloon claims. Yeah, so once again, there are no coincidences. Here is a report from La Nación, which is a Costa Rican publication. Globo blanco volador. El globo blanco apareció la mañana de este jueves en diversos puntos del cielo costaricano, whatever. Yeah, I don't quite speak Spanish, but yeah. So that's what's happening right now. Now, this is part of a larger pattern. Look at this. This is from January 6, 2022. Unidentified flying object over Port Blair, India triggers curiosity and rumors. The same kind of balloon flew over Port Blair in the Andaman Nicobar Islands on around January 6 last year. So they have used this over India. They are using it currently over the US and over Costa Rica and various Latin American nations. So this was used to spy over India. Would you believe it? And what else? Here is an article. It's from 2019. China is using high-tech balloons to spy on India from Tibet. But before we come to this, such balloons have flown over Japan as well. So this is no coincidence. Why would China be interested in the meteorological environment and weather over Japan, the US, Philippines, India, and in South America? It's clearly a spy balloon. You can see it's the same design, the same make of balloon that you see in all these different places. Or the Philippines, it's a different kind of balloon. It's more like a zeppelin, like an airship. So it's a pattern that you are seeing over the past 3-4 years. US now, Latin America right now, and in the past over India, over Japan, and over the Philippines. And this article says it's using high-tech balloons to spy on India from Tibet, from temporarily Chinese occupied Tibet. They're making these balloons fly high over the atmosphere, which gives them a high vantage point from which to spy into Indian territory from Chinese occupied Tibet. And you can see they have these airship kind of balloons and various other balloons as well. Aerostats, Puma. So some of these balloons they have acquired from Russia. Puma aerostats, which have been deployed in China and other places as well. And they have deployed these aerostats in Tibet. They've sent a stratospheric balloon over Port Blair. Port Blair and the Andaman Nicobar Islands are a very sensitive place. India has significant defense establishments and infrastructure over there, naval as well as air force infrastructure in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. The Chinese would like to know what's happening, and these balloons are very unlike satellites. The thing about satellites is that they pass over the earth very rapidly. Typically, roughly, let's say over 90 minutes. It takes about 90 minutes roughly on average to make one orbit of the earth. But a balloon can loiter over a piece of real estate or a piece of territory indefinitely. Yeah. So that's why balloons are an interesting asset to use for spying. So that's what the Chinese are doing, and they don't quite show up on radar, and they're very high. So it's even really hard to send aircraft to intercept a balloon. India had the Foxbat, the MiG-25 fighter plane, which was a high supersonic fighter plane. Its speed was greater than Mach 2, more than twice the speed of sound, and its service ceiling was about 65,000 feet or so, which is typically I think it kind of reaches the height of this balloon. The F-18 that the US has also could reach an altitude of 60,000 feet at most. So these balloons are kind of above the ceiling of most high-end fighter aircraft. So it's kind of hard to bring them down. So it's a very interesting tactic the Chinese are using. So China has stratospheric balloons, and such balloons have also been deployed by Pakistan to, for instance, around the Khan Research Laboratories at Kahuta, where their illicit nuclear program is kind of based. The deployment of these balloons indicates the purpose of channelizing any attacking low-flying aircraft and manipulating them into an air defense kill zone and all that. So the Pakistanis also may have acquired such assets from the Chinese, possibly. So that's why India has to keep an eye on this. India has to take this very seriously. And maybe nations around the world now need to develop the ability to neutralize these threats, So yeah, that's an interesting development. The Chinese are always up to something. Now they're intruding over US airspace and flying their balloon over US ballistic missile facilities. Can you believe it? And they flew it over the Aleutian Islands also, where you have naval and air force and maybe some other facilities as well. And they have been spying on India as well, and on Japan, and on the Philippines. So this is interesting. I'm sure the Americans kind of find it funny, but it's not funny. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. So this is an interesting development that's happening right now as we speak. Two balloons active over the Americas right now. One over the US, one over South America, Costa Rica in the past, over Japan in the past, over India in the past, over Philippines, and it's something they just keep on doing. The Chinese.